Hi everyone, Teacher Yong from Yong Academy here. Today we talk about a different topic, which is I'm going to prove to all of you, all right, that the past year is basically the same old questions, just repeated in slightly different ways. Of course, this doesn't apply to every single past year question, but it applies to a majority of the past year questions, especially in the IGCSE exam syllabus. So I have actually prepared some examples here. So let's take a look. All right. So for example, for this one here, I have two questions from one of my students, a few of my students actually. So like they got two different questions wrong. All right. So we can look at like, for example, the first question first. So this first question here, which is question 15, right? The question is asking about the concentration of hydrogen ions and the concentration of the hydrogen ions in, oh, sorry, hydrogen ions in hydrochloric acid and the hydrogen ions concentration in ethanoic acid. So if we see the common term here is acid and hydrogen. So basically it's asking about whether they are a strong or a weak acid. So if the student has a clear understanding of a strong and a weak acid, then they would be clear here that why the ethanoic acid has a lower concentration because it's partially dissociated. Like if students have studied this chapter before, they definitely should have studied that strong acid fully dissociates, weak acid partially dissociates. All right. So like you see this question here, and if we go over to this question 16 here, here they ask another question, which is what is the definition of a strong acid? And then you can see here is a proton donor, which is something else that the student have to memorize or understand, right? That acids is a proton donor because it donates out the H plus, which is the hydrogen plus ion with the positive charge. That's why it's a proton donor. And it completely dissociates. Like the same keyword here, completely dissociates, because here they're asking about strong acid. Whereas in question 15 here, they're asking about a weak acid. That's why the answer is partially dissociated. But the student got both questions wrong because at the time that they were doing this past year, they were not clear what is the difference between strong and weak acid. Or maybe we can say they kind of forgot about it. All right, I have another example here. So we can look here. This is another example that sometimes student might miss. So let me just zoom in. So the first example I have here is the question is asking, write the chemical equation for the reaction, but the student was not sure what a chemical reaction meant. Like which one is a chemical reaction? So in this instant, these few students, they mixed up between not knowing what is a chemical reaction. And then if I move over here, this one here, okay, actually this answer is wrong. So let's just get out a red pen and mark it wrong. This question here is asking for the formula of the compound. So if they're asking formula of the compound, we can say something like, actually this student got it correct, which is this one here, NH4 bracket 2 SO4. So technically the answer is in there, but they might not be able to get full marks because they didn't give exactly what the question wants. The question only wants the formula. So when they say they want the formula, it's just this one single thing. Whereas if we go to a previous question, when they say the chemical equation, then they want the whole chemical equation. So we have to answer according to the question. So students need to be clear what chemical equation means, what chemical formula means. Sometimes it might be a bit confusing because in front of this formula, they might add the word chemical formula. So students need to be able to tell chemical formula is just one thing. Chemical equation is the entire equation. Like for example, this one here. And I have one more example. This student here, don't look at the other ones. We just zoom in on this one here. Okay, maybe the student forgot the chemical equation, but you see in this question here, they're asking for chemical equation again. They're not asking for chemical formula. But in the exam, especially the IGCSE exam, they love to switch between asking chemical formula and chemical equation. So like, yes, I'm repeating myself at this point, but students need to be clear on the differences between these two. So like, these are just a few examples, right? So there's a lot of things in chemistry that students need to pay attention to. One is the keyword. That means sometimes you might see that the question is almost the same, except for the last sentence, like they ask for chemical equation or chemical formula. Just that one word difference, the student have to give a different answer because the question wants different things, right? Or for example, the exam question sometimes will repeat and ask about the same thing because there's only that few chapters in chemistry. So students, as long as they have a clear idea of every single chapter, they should be able to answer 95% of all the questions in the past years. And then the remaining 5%, it really depends on the understanding capability of the student. They need to think beyond the syllabus for the extra 5%. But I would say getting 95% is pretty good because 95% of the exam can be gotten just by understanding and memorizing the required syllabus. And the remaining 5%, the students have to think a little beyond the syllabus. Yeah. So I hope that helped you. So if it helped you, please do give a like and subscribe, and share it to your friends. And see you in the next video.